All right, we are live at the California Craft Beer Summit. My name is Chris Frenari, the editor of Brewbound, and to my right is another Christopher Kramer, Chris Kramer, the co-founder of Karl Strauss. Chris, thank you for joining our live broadcast. We're going to be doing this for 5 hours today, and you're our first guest.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm honored to be the first.
Yeah, well, we're honored to have you. Before I start peppering you with a whole bunch of questions, I have to give a big shout out to our sponsors for making this all possible. Without them, we wouldn't be out here. We wouldn't be able to fly from Boston, bring our crew up from San Diego. So big shout out to Thielman Container, Cask Global Brewing Systems, Lily Pad, and Live Oak Bank. Thank you for allowing us to set up in the expo hall, put this news desk together, and chat with fine people like Chris for the balance of the day. So we'll be with you all day today and tomorrow for everyone tuning in. We got a whole bunch of guests, but let's check in with Karl Strauss. Chris, what's the latest and greatest?
Well, the latest and greatest is, praise the Lord, people are loving Aurora Hoppyalis. I brought samples for us.
Thank you.
We had a great first half of the year, double-digit sales growth with this brand.
Wow.
And the IRI data is just killing it in Southern California. So we're very excited to continue to grow the distributed beer side of our business.
Now, where did you guys finish up production-wise last year, and where are you guys trending for 2018?
I think we were the 41st largest craft brewer in the U.S. Last year we ended up growing about 17.5% as a company. This year it's going to be a little lower than that, but I still think we're hoping to do double digits.
Wow.
In sales growth. So it's been a good year. I think we have industries that we are participating in that are seeing headwinds, and one side is the craft beer side of the industry, and there's well known, what's happening there. But the other side is just the restaurant industry across the nation and what's happening with full-service dining, especially here in California, where the labor costs have become such a challenge for full-service dining, and the number of full-service dining restaurants is decreasing.
Well, you have the labor cost, you have tipping issues that are sprouting up all over the country, a lot of debate about whether to tip employees or take the tips away. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think tipping is not going away. It's part of our culture. I think, though, you have to have a sensible approach to tipping. Unfortunately, there are only 7 states in the country that don't recognize tips as wages for the purposes of minimum wage determination. California is one of those 7, although California also taxes employers on tips as though they are wages. So it's regrettable they get it coming and going, but it creates an environment where our most highly compensated employees in our own premise operations are tipped employees, maybe making $30, $40 an hour in their actual pay. Well, when the state decrees that we have to give them another $5 an hour, then it takes away our ability to give that $5 an hour to the people who are working in the heart of the operation who don't necessarily participate in tips. So I can't give it to the team member who is working, on the fryer, who's making $15 an hour, and I'd much rather give it to somebody who is working there than somebody who's already making $30 or $40 an hour.
Right. Well, and just the cost of living in California, too, is astronomical. I mean, I grew up here. I used to live here. I live in Boston now. I've been there for 8 years. And every time I come back, I see Teslas driving around like they're Toyota Camrys. And it's like crazy. And one of the things that I think is going to have, or is going to be really challenged is that restaurant world. Where, if you can't afford to live near all the places where the work is, you got to move out. What do the restaurant operators do then?
Well, the restaurant operators are across the country facing declining guest counts, and that is a challenge. Ultimately, the people who succeed are going to be the ones who figure out how to deliver a sufficient value proposition to the guests to entice them to come frequently enough to make their business economic. But in addition to that, it's going to be the operators who are able to embrace technological innovations and be able to apply those to their operations in ways that lower their costs, their labor costs and other costs, while simultaneously improving the guest experience. And that's a huge challenge, especially for single unit operators.
Yeah.
You know, for multi-unit operators, they have more resources to be able to go out and invest in these new technologies, you know, the handheld devices, card readers, everything like that. But if you're a single unit operator, you might not be able to do that. And business models are going to have to change, and the expectations of Americans are going to change. Hopefully we won't end up where, you know, a lot of other countries are, where service standards have been so denigrated that, you know, you go to those countries and you think, wow, there's just no service at all here.
Yeah.
And I think Americans enjoy some of the highest service levels in the world, but part of it is our tipping system that we have. It works.
It works. You have 11 locations now?
11 locations, but 10 of them are our satellite brew pubs, and then the 11th is our main distributing brewery in Pacific Beach.
Now, do you guys plan to continue growing through the brew pub model and establishing more locations despite some of the headwinds that you mentioned?
Absolutely. In fact, you know, we're lucky enough to have 10, you know, existing locations and to have the resources to be able to embrace the changes that need to be made to succeed in the new environment. And we also believe that with the headwinds in the restaurant industry, especially after January 1 here in California, where the next level of minimum wage increase goes into effect, we think that there's going to be a lot of restaurant failures across the state. And as restaurants fail, it's going to create new real estate opportunities. And so one of the ways you make an economic go in the business is buying right in the first place.
Yep.
You know, Uncle Karl always said with respect to brewing equipment that, you know, he didn't care whether you paid retail, wholesale, or bankruptcy prices for good equipment. As long as you got good equipment, the beer doesn't care, but the ROI sure does.
Yep.
And so if you were able to pick up fully fixturized restaurants at pennies on the dollar, and we've done this a number of times in the history of our company, and then make an incremental investment to transform it into your concept and use and add your brewery, then you have a shot at having a profitable ongoing business.
Wow. I mean, it seems like you guys are perfectly set up, given kind of the trajectory of both the brewing industry and the restaurant industry, to really capitalize on some of these opportunities.
Well, we've been very blessed, and you know, it's funny. You're in business as long as we've been. You know, it's going on our 30th year now.
Yep.
And your model goes in and out of favor over time. So for a long time, people criticized us and said, "Hey, you know, how come you guys aren't distributing all over the country in other states?" And now the world has kind of come back to us and saying, "Hey, actually having, you know, your own premises and an environment that you can control, where you can build customer loyalty, and then also having one state, California, that has 39.5 million people, and making that your one state environment, we figure we can continue growing for a long, long time despite the headwinds in the industry."
So, who protects your crystal ball when you leave to come to events like this?
Well, my business partner, Matt, always has the crystal ball with him. He carries the football. And, you know, that's why I get to come on the road and talk with friends like you.
Well, I mean, it really seems like patience has paid off. You stuck to your guys' ideals, you stuck to a business plan, and you're not, like you said, entering your 30th year. How does a brand sustain itself this long and, you know, maintain success in such a competitive environment like the craft beer category right now at 30 years old?
Well, it's constant reinvention. You know, I always think about my background as a history major, and I'm a big fan of American history and the pioneering movement. And, you know, with the pioneers, as they came west across the United States and America and settled it, you know, they kept pushing the frontier. Well, if you were a pioneer and you stopped moving west, then you stopped being a pioneer. You became a settler, and it's different. And so the trick is, in businesses, what you have to do is you have to continuously push west. And that's difficult because people like routine. People like to settle in with what they are today. And, but if you do that, you won't be in business 30 years from now because the world is changing so rapidly. And in fact, we look at all the disruption that's going on in both the craft brewing industry right now and the restaurant industry as huge opportunities for us. But you have to be willing to take a look at everything that you're currently doing and saying nothing is sacred. We'll blow up anything to make sure that we meet the needs of our guests and customers in the future.
Sure. So speaking of that change, obviously one of the most significant developments ongoing, of course, is the legalization of cannabis.
Sure.
Just legalized here in California.
Right.
Been, getting more and more accepted across the country, and probably a future at some point down the road where it's legal everywhere.
Right.
Potentially even federally legal. What kind of impact do you think cannabis is going to have on the beer industry just in general?
Well, it was interesting to see in the presentation this morning that apparently it's not having any discernible impact on beer consumption. And in fact, the states that don't have cannabis are the ones that are experiencing the greatest declines in beer sales.
Interesting.
But my thought, and this is a gut feel rather than looking at statistics, is to a certain degree there is a substitution effect. And, especially in states like Oregon where the cost has gotten so low because of overproduction, that if you look at a high, the cannabis high versus a beer buzz on a per cent basis, the cannabis high now can be a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
Now, people don't drink beer for a buzz necessarily, and they don't necessarily go to cannabis just for a high, but it might be for relaxation or pain killing or whatever other reason. But if you're just looking at those two things side by side, I think that's a challenge for all alcoholic beverages. But my thought also is, praise the Lord, craft beer is the least susceptible to being hurt by cannabis because, one, cannabis and craft beer go well together, and secondly, the lower alcohol levels in craft beer allow people to use that in addition to cannabis without necessarily throwing themselves over a cliff,
As opposed to spirits or wine.
Yeah, spirits, where suddenly things can go terribly wrong quite quickly.
Now, are you somebody who complements substitutes or doesn't participate at all?
Compliments. I'm a complimenter.
Okay, so you're a complimenter. This is on the record. Chris Kramer is a complimenter with cannabis.
I'm a complimenter. And I recommend, if you use cannabis, complement with craft beer.
Okay, and when you do complement, do you find that your consumption actually decreases? Or, I know this is purely anecdotal, but do you have maybe one fewer beer than you ordinarily would?
It's a completely different social situation. Traditionally, I think people use beer as a social beverage. Mm-hmm. And so the opportunity to go out and to, be with friends and drink a number of beers, if you're at home, I think the consumption goes down, and I don't recommend driving, in either situation. But I think ultimately that there is, when you're complementing, you decrease usage of either.
Yeah, well, I think there's a disposable income issue that will come into effect at some point. We've seen data that suggests that the legal cannabis market in North America will exceed, I think, $24 billion by 2021.
Unbelievable.
So, it's still got a long ways to go to getting to where beer's at in terms of total retail value. But those are dollars that aren't going to beer, wine, spirits, total alcohol. So it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Absolutely. And people's ability to absorb any, sort of altering substance is limited. It's finite. And I think you're going to be challenged on a dollar sense, and I think just an absorption sense.
Awesome. All right. Well, we got to make way for our next guest. One final question.
Sure.
What are you looking forward to over the next couple days here at the CCBA?
Well, first of all, it's great to see so many of our California craft brewers coming together. in the celebration of our craft. But the Summit Festival on Saturday is truly the best beer tasting, in California. To have so many brewers together sharing unique beers, and it's going to be the last time we're here for the next couple of years. So we're going to take this show on the road to Long Beach next year and share with Southern California some of the fun of Summit.
Well, that's good news because I connected through Long Beach, so I won't have to jump on that second plane now.
Terrific.
All right.
Can't wait to see you.
Cheers. See you next year. Thanks for
Good
coming
to
on.
see you. Cheers.
Cheers.